Good morning, everyone. How was your day yesterday? Up? Good? Yeah. Yeah, it was awesome yesterday. And have you attended any parties last night? Because I did. And if you did attend a party yesterday and then still woke up today morning to come here, then I appreciate that. But thank you for joining me today. My name is Mahdi, and I work for Vaadin. How many of you heard about Vaadin before? Whoa, that's a big number. That's cool. So Vaadin, as you may have heard about it before, is a UI framework for Java developers. And that's pretty much what I have for this slide. Because I'm not going to today work or talk about Vaadin. I'm going to talk about technology in general. So let's go back in time 5 years ago. How many of you had a problem convincing his boss that you should migrate your desktop application to cloud, because cloud is a new trend and you have to have everything on cloud and no one should create something on desktop application anymore? I've been there, and that was only 5 years ago, approximately. So technology has been moving very fast, and now we no longer need to negotiate whether cloud is a good solution or not. And whether you like it or not, mobile is now taking over. So what we can see now, the new trend now is everyone rely on mobile or handheld device more than desktop devices. But what I've seen is that most of people, including myself, are not really convinced. They cannot feel that they can make this kind of presentation on a mobile. I have to have a laptop, right? I cannot code on a mobile. I cannot make Photoshop or video producing on mobile. Is that correct? How many of you agree with me? Yes. So mobile is not really there. So what is the story? The story is pretty simple. We are a content producer. Most of you, and including myself, we are content producer. A content producer is someone who has fancy, big screen. He's using powerful software. He has a very nice piece of processor. And moreover, he has high-speed internet, using it all the time. A content producer might not really see what the end user really care about. The end user might not have any of that. The end user doesn't care about any of what you have at home. He just wants something that works. And this is what I'm discussing today. So instead of just having your application and assuming that your application is going to be run by another developer or another content producer, let's go back a little bit and think about our users. This statistics shows that whether you like it or not, in end of 2013 or beginning of 2014, mobile took over. The number, if we count the number of internet users all around the world, we will find that the number of mobile users connected to internet are more than number of internet users connected through desktop. Which means that if you want to access or if you want to target the big majority of people, if you want your application to go viral, if you want to access everyone in the world, then you need to think about mobile first. This graph shows a comparison between us, people here in this room, and the whole world, anyone who is using internet. You might have seen this, but many people don't really care about the latest technology. They are not really enthusiastic about having the latest powerful processor. They don't have, they just want to do everything on mobile because they think it's easy. Many companies around the world decided to adopt the mobile-first strategy. So here we have this nice comparison that tells you a clue. So traditionally, when we are developing for desktop, we know that it's going to work. We know how to do everything. But if you develop for mobile first, which means that make your application work on mobile device, then eventually, out of the box, it works on tablet and desktop, right? There is no internet applications that work on mobile device that cannot work on desktop. That's by default. So it's a big win. If you design your application on a mobile device first, then later on you can add some little bit more tweaks to make it look nicer on tablet, and then even more tweaks and more features to make it work nicer on desktop applications. And I have my own definition of mobile first. Costa. Costa is a famous coffee shop here, right? Is it more famous or Starbucks? There is no Starbucks. I haven't seen Starbucks so far. There is not. There is. Okay. But I've seen Costa all over. But let's imagine that your user is going to Costa Cafe, holding, like he bought a coffee, and he's holding his coffee in one hand, and he decided to use his mobile on the other hand. So will your application serve him to do everything with one thumb, holding the mobile with one hand without falling the coffee on the ground? This is how you can test your application and how much its user experience matches the mobile-first strategy. So think about the user that he's using a touch device. He doesn't want a small link or a small button. Think about users that he is using his thumb all the time. So he should be able to access everything and do everything in your application with just one thumb, and with balancing a coffee and mobile device. And one more thing. So your user kept walking in the street and then went to the tube, and then went to the North Station, and went very deep underground and lost connectivity. So also, let's think about if your web application that is running on your mobile device is going to still work even though you lost your connectivity. Mobile-first design contains actually a lot of topics, but my interest today is the offline-first design for mobile. Because it's the only way to guarantee 100% always-on user experience for your users. It's happening now, and you can do it right now. But before talking about offline first, I'll just go over a very quick introduction to web components, because since we are talking about modern stuff and we are shifting from 5 years to 2 years to right now, let's also talk about the future of web and how web look like. So how many of you heard about web components? Impressive. So I'm really glad that the number of people here knowing about web components is quite high. But I'm gonna just go very, very quick over the introduction of web components, what it's all about, so that we are all on the same page. So web component contains 4 topics. The first topic is template, and then shadow DOM, and then HTML imports, and finally custom elements, which means that, briefly, you write an HTML template, and then your HTML template will contain some HTML code. This HTML code, later on, we are going to call it a shadow DOM. It's going to be rendered as a shadow DOM. To import this HTML template inside your code, you need to use something called HTML imports. Finally, you are going to give your template a selector name, a tag name. That's what we call custom element. To take this in practice, let's talk about a tag called video. So a video tag is quite popular, I suppose. It's an HTML5 standard now, and you can use it right now in probably all browsers, and basically it renders a video. If you inspect this tag in the browser and open something called show shadow DOM, you're gonna see this inside. It contains divs and locations and labels and so on. So even though this is a video, it contains inside some divs, labels, and so on. So it's a set of basic HTML elements composed together into an HTML template and rendered as a big tag called video. So in fact, browser manufacturers have been implementing shadow DOMs since a while, but they never told us. And now is the time to take over as a developer and start creating our own custom elements. Instead of just using video, just customize your own element. Create your own template, HTML template, and give it a name. Give it your own custom tag name. That's all about web components. Unfortunately, web components are not really supported by all browsers, probably Chrome only and some Firefox. That's why Google came in and introduced something called Polymer. Polymer is a way of making web components work in all browsers. It contains something called polyfill that make the custom tag that you have created, the HTML imports work inside a normal browser and a normal HTML file. And they didn't stop there. They also created a set of nice elements. We call them Polymer Elements that consist of good infrastructure for creating even more advanced web components. Probably you have used some of them already when you are Googling around. When you're using one of Google products, then probably you already stumbled upon one of those elements. And those elements are quite powerful, and we are using them all the day. And what is of my interest today is Platinum element, because it provides mobile functionalities inside my web application, like Bluetooth, like offline, like push, like caching, and so on. So it's quite powerful, and having it is very easy. So if you want to cache your web application inside the browser, just 2 or 3 lines of code, and you are done. So a tag called Platinum SW register, put an attribute called auto register, and you're pretty much done. You're caching all your application. That sounds good. That's why we at Vaadin decided to take this even further and port our well-known UI components from being only just for Java developers. We decided to open them for the whole community, and we are now making them available for anyone who is developing with any language through Polymer. So we decided to make, for example, Vaadin Grid, which is data grid element, powerful with frozen columns, unlimited scrolling. You can have multiple headers, freeze columns, and so on. If you don't like those bullet buttons, you can just take a look at how nice it looks like after being rendered. This is basically one of our components that you can use right now with whatever language you like, because it's now a JavaScript component or Polymer web component. You can basically have it inside any HTML element or HTML document. We've created also many other elements like date picker, upload, and so on. I'm going to go over this. We also have these nice chart elements that render hundreds or thousands of different combinations of charts. You can have them right away. Like if you look at over there, this is basically how to have this component inside your HTML document. But before going back to my topic, I just have a small announcement here. Our team are based in Finland, and when we traveled here, they gave us this device, and we really don't want to go back with it. So please help us getting rid of it. Visit us in our booth. We have a small contest that takes 2 minutes to compete, and if you win, you have a great chance to win this nice device and help us not taking back home. And if you don't like it, it's really powerful. It's like it contains a camera, and it's a bit bigger than iPhone, but I'm sure you're gonna like it. But if you don't like it, we have some other nice stuff. But yeah, let's go back to the offline first topic where I started. So I was talking about web components, and I was talking about offline first. Now let's put things together, right? So we said that caching might be a nice solution. Is that correct? Probably just caching the web page. What do you think? So it might be a nice solution in small scale, like websites, normal websites, but it's not really useful when you want to have relational data, when you want to have a lot of data in your rendered in your application, when you want to navigate through pages and so on. That's why there has been new implementations that are announced, like LoveField. So LoveField is another product also by Google, and it's pretty active. If someone is asking if it's like dead or not yet, I think it's still active. Like people are still committing to this open source project. It's completely open source. It's completely written in JavaScript. It contains an option to create a relational database where inside your browser. So the database is no longer on the server. The database is no longer installable. Your user doesn't need to install the database. The database is now inside the browser. So how this works? Basically, you take a copy of your server database and save it in the browser. an exact copy of the database inside your browser. And then when you go offline, when you lose signal, then your application will still work fully. Although I like LoveField because it's very easy to use and it's very powerful, but it has a very small problem, which it doesn't provide a replication. So your user is happy because he's still able to navigate through the application, but he has a small problem. He decided to modify the data and click save. The data doesn't go anywhere. And LoveField, for some reason, they decided not to design it to provide data replication. It doesn't push the data back to the server. Google clarification about that is because the different types of back-end servers that you might have is quite huge, and supporting all protocols is a big hassle, and they are not really interested in doing that right now. But there is another solution. It's called Firebase. So Firebase is actually, it was a company, a separate company that's providing a pretty much better solution here, but then Google acquired this company. So again, this is a fourth or third solution, again, by Google. And the solution basically is telling you, all right, so we will not support a lot of protocols on the server side. We are going to give you our own database to host your data there, and then we are going to do all the work, data replication and everything. But at the time of creating those slides, I created those slides approximately 1 month ago or a bit more, and things changed. I'm telling you, technology is changing even every day. Only 2 weeks ago, this slide is no longer valid and it's outdated because this is the correct slide, right? So Google also rebranded Firebase, and now it's a different platform, or not different, I mean, bigger platform. It contains more tools and so on. But aside from Google, there are also some other nice implementation like CouchDB, which is an open source community-based approach that allows you to do the same thing exactly. I personally like CouchDB for my pet projects when I test. They are very powerful, and they solve this problem of data replication by telling you what you have to do is basically implement a protocol called CouchDB on your server. You don't have to host your database in their servers. It's open source. You are free to do whatever you want. So the idea is CouchDB is an Apache Foundation-owned protocol. If you implement this protocol in front of your data server, then you are all set, and CouchDB will do all the work. So this can help in solving the problem of sync back from client to server, pushing data back to server. All right, so how this happen? Basically, you have a continuous bidirectional replication between your local, this is your browser, and this is your protocol in front of your server. You have a continuous bidirectional replication between both of them all the time as far as you are online. And your device is reading and updating the data on the local database, not the server database. So weak signal, no connectivity. What happens? Basically, you are still having a local part of the data. The data is still saved locally, and then you can later on, when you go back online, you can go back replicating the data back to the server and so on. So I have here an interesting demo for you. So this is an open source demo called Expense Manager demo. This demo, probably I should increase the font a bit. Yeah. All right. So this demo show the usage of Polymer Elements, Vaadin Elements, of course, and also some other stack like CouchDB server and CouchDB local database. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at how this demo look like. So probably I'll increase the font a bit as well. Yeah, and so this is totally created with web components. You can take a look at the open source. When I log in here, I can see a welcome screen, a splash screen, and then I see this nice grid. You can scroll. As you can see, when I scroll horizontally, I have this frozen column. And then I can scroll also vertically. I have this nice date component, date picker element. Let's try to filter this data. So for example, I'm going to pick 1st of March. Automatically, data is filtered. And then just to see an impact, I'm going to choose close dates. So from 1st of March till 10th of March, maybe. Yeah, we have only one item, right? You can also, like, if I uncheck this, then it's automatically filtered. You can choose a minimum or maximum, for example, and so on. You can choose the merchant, and voila. We have also here this nice, let me clear the filters just to go back to my data. We have here also this nice Vaadin chart element, and it's displaying the expenses for last 12 months, and that's pretty much it. Also, we have this nice upload component. Let me try to demo it. So I'm gonna drag this expense here, and here we go, it's updated. You can select, for example, the merchant, the total, the date. Let's pick today, for example, comment. And here we go. Now, to the important part, what will happen if I unplug my internet cable? Oh, I unplugged the wrong cable. All right. Yeah, let's go. Yes, we are back. We're back. Yeah, this is something that you should take into consideration. If you're presenting, then you should provide the projector first design or something. So yeah, let's unplug the internet cable, the right cable this time. And just to make sure, I don't have internet here, so Wi-Fi is turned off. And then let's try to reload the page. Oh, that's that's a small bug because I have here the URL. But if I just remove this chunk from the URL, then I still have everything. My grid is still displaying everything. As you can see, my chart here is displaying everything. And as you can see, because I added this parking ticket or this expense that is of 10,000, then the chart went different. It's now rendering completely different display of the chart. And the data is still working. I can display the invoices, and I can pretty much do everything as I used to do. So how we created this, I'm going to go back online. Yeah. So how we created this, in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you a live coding of how something like this started. Of course, I won't have enough time to show you everything or how we created everything here, but I'll just go over the basics and how we attached CouchDB to our project. So I have here a local CouchDB installation. So this is local CouchDB installation, and as you can see, it's running locally here. And it's showing me the kind of databases I have. And I'm going to start by a very simple Is it visible, or should I increase the font? Yeah. All right. So I'm going to start with very simple HTML here that is rendering one of our Vaadin element, which is Vaadin grid. So I started here by including web components. This is essential to be able to render a web component in your browser. And also, I have imported our Vaadin grid that is served through Vaadin CDN. Just some styling and so on. I also have here, as you can see, the tag name is called Vaadin grid. So this is, of course, not a familiar tag in HTML DOM. This is our custom web component. And the functionality goes here. So basically, I defined something called grid, and it loads data lazily, and it goes over this method that's basically taking a parameter and a callback method that whenever I scroll, it keeps loading more chunks of data from this URL. And it calls a function called getJSON. GetJSON is basically the responsible function about loading my data lazily. Let's see the result. So the result is pretty much here. This is the data. Whenever I scroll, it fetches the data from internet. Pretty much neat. But should we try to do this internet test again? So I'm going to unplug the cable again. And let's try to reload this page. Here we go. So it's cached, right? But it's not rendering a data. So this is my problem. So even though I used caching, and even though the web components support offline, it's basically a bit working offline, but it's not supporting offline database. So throughout my demo, I'm going to show you how to implement an offline database for this grid. Of course, it didn't render anything because it totally relies on the getJSON function that fetches the data from the server. So here we go. All right. So first step I'm going to do here, just to make my demo a bit meaningful, I'm going to add a small editor for those elements. So whenever I select an element, it's going to pop up in a text field, and then I will be able to modify it. So to do that, I have here the history of what I'm going to do exactly. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, define a variable called selected to define which item has been selected in the grid. And I had to define grid globally. And also down there, I defined this little nicely designed table that contains 3 input fields and a button. When you click on this button, you call a function called update. And update is very simple. It updates the value of my variable called selected. So selected.firstName is getting the value from fn, which is here. And last name, ln, and finally email is em, and so on. Also, I defined an event listener for the grid. So when a selected item's changed, what I do is basically update those text field with the select. So I gather the item here, the selected item from the grid, and I save it inside selected, and then I update the value here. Let's see the results. So pretty simple. If I select Jackson here, I can see the results. And then if I try to modify the data, I can click update, but of course nothing will happen. And the reason behind that is I'm here updating the selected variable, but I do nothing with this, right? So my variable is just saved in the memory, but I'm not reflecting this into the grid. Let's not worry about that for now. let's just go straight to how to implement an offline database. So the next step would be fetching data from a CouchDB. So I have my data here saved in UK1, well, in the online version, my GitHub version, it's called TechLunch, but my local version should be UK1. But anyway, so I started by including my script through something called CouchDB. For those of you who are experienced in web components and modern development will immediately tell me why you're not using Node or why you're not using Bower and why you're including the script directly. I know. So here, I just try to make it simple, very simple demo. So I don't want to go over outside topics. I just want to focus on the topic here, which is just using CouchDB. All right? So excuse me, I'm not using NPM today, I'm not using Bower. I'm just going to include a script called CouchDB directly inside my HTML file. And then here is the magic word. So I defined a variable called remote database that define an instance of CouchDB and give it the URL of my local CouchDB. Of course, later on, it's not going to be your local host. It's going to be your remote database host. To the bit technical part, I'm no longer going to fetch the data from JSON. I'm not going to fetch the data from online anymore. I will just remove this getJSON method. And instead, I'm going to call remote_db. This is our variable that is holding the CouchDB, the local CouchDB. I'm going to call all docs, and I'm going to load the grid with my item. So this is something that you can check out later. It's a technicality on how to convert a local variables or a locally saved data inside a Vaadin grid. Nothing fancy here to see, except that instead of loading the data from JSON, I'm loading the data through this remote database variable and fetching the data here inside the grid. Right? So let's see the results. And don't expect to see much big differences here. So I'm just here, just loading the data from remote database. Nothing, at this point, nothing really changed. Let's go a bit further. And instead of using remote database for loading my grid, I'm going to use local database. So how to use that? If I go back to my latest addition here, my latest code here, all the time I'm using remote DB. So this is not exactly what we want to do. We want to have a local copy of the database in the browser and then load the data from the local browser. So this is going to be my next modification. So I defined another variable here called LocalDB. And here in LocalDB, I'm just giving it a local name. It's no longer a remote database. It's just something that's going to be saved inside my browser. And this is the second magical word I'm using today, which is couchdb.replicate. And that's pretty much it. So replicating the remote database with the local database, right? And then later on, I no longer need to use remote DB. I'm going to use local DB all the way. And let's see the results. So basically, when I open this page for the first time, nothing loads. Yeah, here we go. So when I open this page for the first time, data gets loaded in the browser. And then later on, I can make the third test of unplugging my cable. And if I reload the page, nothing works. So there is a technical demo effect here. Yeah.
Your DB is on the local host, right? So it doesn't do anything if you unplug the cable.
But I'm loading it from a local. I'm loading the grid from LocalDB here.
That's what's running on the local host. The remote is on local host.
Excuse me?
The remote is on the local host, right?
Yes.
So if you unplug the cable.
Yeah, that's actually a good. Yeah, that's true. That's true. My remote database is on a local host, so if I unplug the cable, nothing will work, right? Nothing will happen, right? That's a good point. Thank you for pointing out. So how to do that? Basically, let's kill this, probably, right? So if I kill my CouchDB, actually, this is going to be more meaningful, right? Thank you for pointing me out to that. Yes, I completely forgot. So I'm going to quit my CouchDB. Then I'm no longer having a remote database. My server went down. And let's reload. Yeah, still my data is loaded. One more reload, yeah. Yeah. So now, even though my server went down, I'm unable to reach my server anymore, I'm still loading the data offline, and I'm still dealing with the data offline. So far, I demonstrated how to load the data, how to get your data loaded inside your grid. But let's try now to go back to this editor and see if I will be able to also modify the data and push it back to the local server, to the remote server. So the next step would be updating data offline. And here I just made a small modification, which is basically, let me expand this a bit. So this is the update function. Remember when I mentioned that I'm updating the local variable called selected, but nothing happened really? So what I'm going to do is basically call localdb.put selected, which means that my local database will put this selected variable inside the local version. In this line, I'm trying to update the grid as well, so refresh the grid so that I can see the modified data in the grid right away. But at this point, it won't work, and I will get back to this later on. But one more thing I need to do as well, which is also make my database sync. So instead of replicate, I'm going to call couchdb.sync. So this is the third magic word for today, or magic line for today. Instead of just replicating the data, I want to sync the two databases so that if I do modifications locally, it goes to the server. And if I make modification to the server, it gets replicated as well in the local database. The sync API is basically a shortcut for calling replicate 2 times. So instead of saying couchdb.replicate remote local and couchdb.replicate local remote, I'm just calling sync. Make them all the time synced. Let's see the results. So here, let's select this item, for example, and modify the first name. And then, remember, this is item number 6. So devox UK and update. Nothing happened. Let's refresh the data, and it got updated. So as I said, refresh grid will not work for now. Let's go back to this a bit later. But the important here is that I managed to update my database and sync it. Should we test again offline? Let's do it. So yeah, actually, I was offline. Yeah, again. So my CouchDB was offline already, and it worked, right? So I didn't have to do that. I was going to unplug my cable one more time. But yeah, my CouchDB is offline. It's not working, but still I was able to modify the data locally. And when I refreshed the page, the data got modified. Let's update this as well for the sake of demo. Nothing happens. And if I refresh, then item number 7 was updated as well. So now what I achieved? What I achieved is I'm no longer relying on my remote database. I'm no longer relying on connectivity. I'm totally offline right now, but still my application is up and running. Isn't that great? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'll go over this a bit like later. All right, so because so far it looks good, I'm going to go ahead and show you a very nice addition to the CouchDB, which is plugin support. CouchDB actually come with plenty of plugins. If you want to add external plugins to your CouchDB, one of my favorite is, and the default for anyone, I guess, it's called Find, which allows you to query the database, like select and so on. What I did here in brief is including the CouchDB Find add-on as a script, and then I had to do this step, which is basically indexing my database using first name. So in other words, I'm now able to query my database using first name. What I'm going to do down here is adding an HR and then an input type text that is called search. When you click on this button, it's going to fire up a function called find. Find function is basically getting the value from the search field and then query the database, local database.find, and searching for the keywords that I have typed. And it doesn't really do much thing. It just pump the data out to the document and show me the search results. So let's take a look at the final results so far. So I have here my search field. I'm going to search for Devox. And when I click Find, here we go. So I have the two guys that I modified their first name to Devox, and now I'm able to query my database. Remember that I'm still offline. So the functionality is still working. Everything is still working, but even though I'm still totally offline. Now let's go back to this issue of why when I update here, when I call grid.refresh, it doesn't refresh. Actually, there is a learning curve here when you start to use CouchDB. And one of the important things that you need to take into consideration is the revision. So CouchDB will keep a revision for all your items, all the modifications. And if you want to update a specific item, you must supply the revision as well. So what I will do here is update the revision of selected item. So when I'm updating the selected, I'm adding a new field called rev. This field is just a CouchDB standard, and I'm giving it the original response.rev or revision. In other words, I already have my data saved locally with revision number. And if I don't want to add a new value, if I just want to update the existing value, then I must supply the exact revision number. Think about it as a hash code. This hash code must be the same so that I can modify the same value. If the hash code changes, then it's going to simply insert a new value and a new increment revision. And finally, let's see the final result here today. So if I select Madison, for example, and then update, yeah, probably this is not updated yet. Let's see again. No. Okay, I'll look here for something. Is this the correct file I'm using or not? Yeah, demo effect again. Apparently, this is not the correct file, so I'm gonna just download the latest file. And here we go. So here we go. All right. So let's try this one more time. Yeah. All right. If we try to search one more time, here we go. So that was it. Just to go over what I did in the demo, I started with a grid, and then I realized that I want this grid not to load the data from remote server, but load it from local database. Having a local database was not enough. That's why I implemented replication. And having replication was also not enough. That's why I had to make sync so that I can sync back the data that was modified locally back to the server. Finally, I just made some tweaks, and I showed you how to use, for example, a plugin like CouchDB. Now, let me go back to my slides to talk about some challenges when you are developing such a thing. So, initial load time. Of course, that might sound easy when I develop this. I'm just dumping all my data locally. But you probably don't want to do that. You don't want to download 500 megabytes of data inside the user browser. You don't want your user to wait forever to get his data. So when you are engineering your data, you need to decide what kind of data should this user receive. So this is a bit of challenge and a bit of architecture design on what kind of data and what kind of relations should be loaded locally. Second problem is the security of stored data. So the data is no longer stored in your server securely. It's stored in the browser. So make sure to implement all security concepts needed to maintain the sensitivity and security of the data saved offline. Probably implement authentication mechanism. Probably make sure that the data is not fetched except from same origin, and so on. Finally, which is the topic that you were asking about, race condition. So what if I was offline and I modified the data, and then someone who was selecting the same exact piece of data modified the data from other device? So you will run into race condition. Actually, race condition is not something new for database architectures. They know that even in online databases. So what if two people are modifying the data at the same exact piece of time? What if I opened a page that is displaying data, and someone opened the same page online that is displaying the data? So race condition, although it's a known issue all over, even in online databases, this is something also that you might need to take into consideration and have what is the best choice to store the final data back to your server. That was all for today. Thank you for listening. And please, if anyone has questions, more questions? Yeah, please go ahead.
You mentioned being able to separate things out. So it looks, in all the demos you've had, like you're pulling the entire DB back, and yet your first example was of an expenses report. So you said some things like encryption, but why is there a way to simply deliver only a client's data to their own device and not have everyone with everyone's data? Because encrypted or not, you can't give someone else's expenses report.
Well, so the question is, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking, should I worry about encryption or not? Because if the data is loaded inside my own device, then no one else can access my device except myself, right?
Not quite. So on your device, if you grab the entire DB, you have my expenses and your expenses.
Okay.
They all come from the same database. I don't believe that's acceptable because you shouldn't have my data, whether or not it's encrypted, on your device.
That's why I said in the initial loading time, you should not load really everything. So you should be really selective about what kind of data you should load inside this specific logged-in user. Is that answering your question? Oh, all right.
Where do you put this selection? Surely you can't be on the client side because then you would just open the
So if you are authenticated, so if you are implementing authentication and if you are authenticated user, then hacking around will allow you obviously to still use the data. But the idea is if you logged out, so how to make sure that this data will not be displayed anymore.
So the CouchDB protocol will only get the data that the user is entitled to.
That's what you define in the CouchDB, not PouchDB. So PouchDB doesn't really care about that. PouchDB replicate whatever in the server to the client.
You said it was a protocol that you could implement on top of your own.
Yeah, and inside this protocol, you define what kind of data gets loaded in the PouchDB. All right, I think it's time's up. Please find me at the Vaadin booth. I'm going to hang around there all the time, and I'm going to give away some nice iPad. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day.